In a remote village, children are warned not to speak her name. But what really happened the night the witch appeared? What I'm about to tell you has been passed down through 3 generations, and even today, the elders refuse to sleep with their windows open. Stay with me, because the truth is far more terrifying than you could imagine. Before we dive in, if you love spine-chilling African folklore and true mysterious stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming. Now, let me take you back to 1987, to a village called Ogunleye, nestled deep in the Nigerian rainforest, where something happened that changed everything. The village of Ogunleye was like any other West African settlement. Red clay roads. Thatched roofs. The smell of firewood and pepper soup drifting through the evening air. Life moved slowly there, dictated by the rising and setting of the sun. But there was one rule that everyone followed without question: never, ever venture into the forest after the 7th bell. The 7th bell was rung from the village square every evening at dusk. It was a signal. A warning. And for as long as anyone could remember, breaking this rule meant you might not come back the same, if you came back at all. Now, the elders spoke of a woman. They called her Iya Moremi, though no one alive had ever seen her face. According to legend, she was a powerful healer who lived on the outskirts of the village decades ago. She could cure any illness, they said. Barren women would conceive after visiting her. Dying children would wake up the next morning, laughing and playing as if nothing had happened. But power like that always comes with a price. And the price she paid. Well, that's what this story is really about. Because you see, Iya Moremi didn't just disappear one day. She was banished. Cast out by the very people she had helped. And what the villagers did to her that night, it's something they've been trying to forget ever since. But first, let me tell you about the boy who broke the rule. His name was Tunde. 12 years old, stubborn as a goat, and convinced that all the stories about Iya Moremi were just tales to scare children into obedience. Tunde was one of those kids who question everything. Why can't we go to the forest at night? Why do we ring the bell 7 times? Why does Grandma spit 3 times whenever someone mentions the old healer's name? It was a Friday evening in October when Tunde made his decision. The 7th bell had just finished ringing, its echo fading into the darkening sky. His friends had all run home, but Tunde stood at the edge of the forest, his heart pounding in his chest. "There's nothing out there," he whispered to himself. "Just trees and animals." He took one step. Then another. The forest seemed to swallow the sound of his footsteps. Within minutes, the village lights behind him became tiny orange dots, and then, nothing. Just darkness and the symphony of crickets and night birds. For a while, nothing happened. Tunde even laughed at himself for being scared. He picked up a stick and started hitting it against the trees, whistling as he walked deeper into the bush. But then, something changed. The forest went silent. Completely silent. No crickets. No birds. Not even the rustle of leaves in the wind. It was as if the entire jungle was holding its breath. Tunde stopped walking. His whistling died in his throat. And that's when he smelled it. A thick, sweet smell. Like overripe mangoes mixed with something else. Something wrong. Now, I want you to imagine this for a second. You're 12 years old. You're alone in a pitch-black forest. Every instinct in your body is screaming at you to run, but your legs won't move. Because somewhere in the darkness ahead of you, you hear it. Breathing. Slow. deliberate. And it's getting closer. Ton wanted to scream, but his voice was gone. He wanted to run, but his feet felt like they were buried in mud. The breathing grew louder, and then he saw movement. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, gliding between the trees. And then she stepped into a shaft of moonlight. She was tall. Impossibly tall. Her skin looked like it was made of shadow itself, constantly shifting and rippling. Her eyes glowed a deep amber, like a cat's eyes caught in firelight. But it was a smile that Ton would never forget. Too wide. Too many teeth. A smile that didn't belong on any human face. Ton, she said, and her voice sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. You've come to visit me. How did she know his name? He'd never spoken. Never told anyone he was coming here. But she knew. She knew everything. I didn't mean to. Ton stammered. "Shhhhh," she whispered, and the sound seemed to wrap around him like a cold blanket. Do you know who I am, child? Ton nodded, his whole body trembling. Iya Moremi. Her smile grew even wider. Good. Then you know what your people did to me. You know why I can never leave this forest. You know why I wait here, night after night, year after year. She took a step closer, and Ton could see now that her feet didn't quite touch the ground. She floated, hovering just inches above the forest floor. They burned my home, she continued, her voice taking on a bitter edge. They called me a witch. Me. The woman who saved their children, who healed their sick, who asked for nothing in return but respect. And how did they repay me? She leaned down, her face inches from Ton's. He could feel the cold radiating from her skin. Could see the centuries of pain and rage swimming in those amber eyes. And then she asked him a question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But before I tell you what she said, you need to understand what really happened all those years ago. Because the villagers, they've been lying. Iya Moremi had indeed been a healer. The best the region had ever seen. But she had one rule: she never accepted payment in money or goods. Instead, she asked for something else. A promise. A debt to be repaid when she called upon it. For years, this arrangement worked. People made promises they thought they'd never have to keep. Anything you need, Iya Moremi. Just say the word. I owe you my life. But then came the drought. 3 years without proper rain. Crops failed. Children starved. And Iya Moremi came to collect her debts. She asked the villagers to perform a ritual. A ceremony that would bring rain but required sacrifice. Not of life, but of pride. Each family that owed her a debt would have to publicly confess their deepest shame in the village square. In a culture where honor meant everything, this was unthinkable. The village chief would have to admit he'd stolen from the community fund. The pastor would have to confess his affairs. The respected teacher would have to reveal she'd abandoned her firstborn child years ago. They refused. And when Iya Moremi threatened to reveal these secrets herself, they made a decision. Late one night, a mob formed. They called her a witch, a demon, an evil spirit sent to destroy them. They burned her house while she was inside, though some say she escaped into the forest. Others say she died that night, and what walks the forest now is something else entirely. Either way, the next morning, the rains came. Torrential, violent rains that lasted for days. And from that day forward, anyone who entered the forest after the seventh bell was said to face Iya Moremi's judgment. Now remember, Tunde is still standing there, face to face with this being, this legend made flesh. And she's just asked him a question. A question that every child who's ever broken the rule has had to answer. And what happens next? It's the part that makes grown men whisper in the dark. Tell me, child, Iya Moremi said, her voice soft but commanding. What is your village's deepest shame? What secret do they keep locked away, hidden even from the children? Tunde's mind raced. He didn't know. He was just a kid. How was he supposed to know the village's deepest secret? I don't know, he whispered. Iya Moremi's smile faded. You don't know? Or you won't say? I really don't know. I'm just a boy. Please, I just want to go home. For a long moment, she studied him. Then, slowly, she began to circle him, her form gliding soundlessly around him like smoke. Your grandfather, she said finally. Baba turned. He knows. He was there that night. He was one of them. Tunde's blood ran cold. His grandfather, the kindest man he knew, the one who told him stories and carved wooden toys for him, he was part of the mob. He held the torch, Iya Moremi continued. He was the first to throw it. He looked me in the eyes as my home burned, and do you know what he said? He said, "This is God's will." She stopped directly in front of Tunde, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked with emotion. I saved his wife. Your grandmother. She was dying in childbirth with your father. I brought her back from the edge of death. And this is how he repaid me. Tears were streaming down Tunde's face now. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. Sorry. Iya Moremi tilted her head. Sorry won't undo what was done. But perhaps you can help me find peace. She extended one long, shadow-wrapped hand toward him. Take my hand, Tunde. Let me show you the truth. Let me show you what really happened. And then, you decide. Am I the witch they say I am? Or am I something else? Tunde looked at her hand. Every fiber of his being screamed at him not to touch it. But something in her eyes, something beneath the anger and the pain, looked human. Looked sad. Looked lonely. He reached out his trembling hand and, you won't believe what he saw. The moment their hands touched, Tunde's vision exploded with light. He was no longer in the forest. He was standing in the village square, but it looked different. Older. This was decades ago. He saw Iya Moremi as she had been in life. Not a monster, but a woman. Beautiful, middle-aged, with kind eyes and gentle hands. He watched as she healed the sick, delivered babies, counseled the troubled. He saw the respect in people's eyes when they looked at her. But then the drought came. He felt the desperation in the village. Saw children with distended bellies, crying from hunger. Watched as Iya Moremi went from door to door, trying to collect her debts, trying to help. And then he saw the night. The angry mob. The accusations of witchcraft. The fear in Iya Moremi's eyes as they surrounded her home. He saw his grandfather, young and strong, holding that torch. Saw the flames catch. Heard her screams. But he also saw something the villagers didn't know. As the house burned, Iya Moremi had crawled out the back, her skin blistered and burned. And in her pain and rage, something inside her had broken. She had called out to the forest, to the old spirits that lived in the deep places. She had made a bargain. Life for vengeance. She would live, but she would never be human again. The vision faded, and Ton found himself back in the forest, still holding her hand. He understood now. She wasn't a witch before that night. The village had made her into one. "What do you want from me?" Ton asked, his voice barely a whisper. Iya Moremi's grip on his hand loosened. "I want you to tell them. Tell them the truth. Tell them what they did. Tell them that every time they ring that bell, every time they warn their children about me, they are running from their own guilt." She released his hand and began to fade back into the shadows. "Go home, Tunde. And remember, I am not the monster in this story." Ton ran. He ran faster than he'd ever run in his life, branches whipping his face, roots trying to trip him. But this time, the forest seemed to help him. It guided him back to the village, back to the light. He burst into his grandfather's house, breathless and terrified. His grandfather took one look at him and knew immediately where he'd been. "You went into the forest," Ton said, his voice heavy with resignation. Ton nodded, still gasping for air. And then, through tears and trembling words, he told his grandfather everything. About meeting Iya Moremi. About the vision she'd shown him. About the truth. His grandfather listened in silence, his face aging years in those few minutes. When Ton finished, the old man walked to the window and stared out at the dark forest beyond the village. "We were afraid," he finally said. "The drought was killing us. And when she asked us to confess our shames, we couldn't do it. Our pride was worth more to us than her life. God forgive us, our pride was worth more to us than her life." He turned back to Tunde, tears glistening in his old eyes. "She was right to curse us. We deserve to be afraid. We deserve to remember." That night, Ton gathered the elders. In a hushed meeting that lasted until dawn, Ton told his story again. Some believed him. Others thought he'd been frightened by a wild animal and his imagination had done the rest. But one thing changed. The village began to ring the bell differently. Still 7 times, but now, with each ring, they whispered a different word: forgiveness. 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 Years passed. Ton grew up, left the village for university, and eventually became a teacher. But he never forgot that night. And every time he returned home, he noticed something. The forest seemed quieter. Less menacing. The stories about Iya Moremi continued, but they changed slightly. Parents still warned their children, but now they added something new: respect the forest. Respect those we've wronged. Some deaths outlive us all. Ton's grandfather passed away when Ton was 25. On his deathbed, the old man gripped Ton's hand and whispered, "I saw her last night. In my dreams. She looked peaceful. Tell the village. Tell them she's forgiven us." The night after his grandfather's funeral, Ton did something he hadn't done since he was 12. He walked to the edge of the forest after the 7th bell. He didn't go in. He just stood there, at the boundary between the village and the wild. "Iya Moremi," he called softly into the darkness. "Are you still there?" The forest remained silent, but a warm breeze blew past him, carrying the scent of flowers instead of that sickly sweet smell from all those years ago. And in the distance, deep in the forest, he saw a brief flash of amber light. Not menacing. Not angry. Just there. Acknowledging. And then it was gone. To this day, the village of Ogunleye still rings the seventh bell. Children are still warned about the forest after dark. And yes, some still call her a witch. But now, there are others who call her something different. A victim. A woman pushed beyond her limits. A reminder of what fear and pride can make us do. The old-timers say that if you listen carefully when the wind blows through the forest at night, you can still hear her voice. Not angry anymore. Not seeking vengeance. Just waiting. Waiting for the day when every last person who wronged her has passed, when every debt has been paid, when she can finally rest. But some debts, some wrongs, echo through generations. And maybe that's the real curse. Not that Iya Moremi haunts the forest, but that the village can never truly forget what they did. The guilt has become part of their identity, woven into their rituals, whispered in their warnings. Is she still out there? I don't know. Tunde, now in his 50s, still visits the forest edge every year on the anniversary of that night. He leaves offerings. Flowers. Fruits. A quiet apology on behalf of a village that will never fully understand what they lost when they chose fear over gratitude. And every time he does, the forest responds with that same warm breeze. That same brief flash of amber light in the distance. A conversation without words between a man and a legend. The truth is, we'll never know if Iya Moremi is still in that forest. But the villagers, they still whisper her name. They still tell the story. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the real magic isn't in curses or hauntings, but in the stories we tell ourselves to remember our failures, to honor those we've wronged, to become better than we were. So the next time someone tells you a story about a witch, ask yourself, what happened before they became the monster? Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what lurks in the darkness. It's what we're capable of when we let fear control us. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more African folklore and mysterious tales. And let me know in the comments, do you think Iya Moremi was a witch, or was she something else entirely? I see you in the next one. Until then, remember, some names are whispered for a reason.